The sun barely broke the horizon when Jack Thornton stood before the fresh grave. His hat hung loose in his calloused hands. The wooden cross was rough, carved in haste with a hunting knife. Sarah Thornton, beloved wife. The letters were uneven, but they would hold. He didn't cry, couldn't. The tears had dried up somewhere between digging the hole and lowering her wrapped body into the red earth. 2 days ago, she'd been alive, laughing at something he'd said about fixing the fence. Then the pains came. The midwife from town arrived too late. Sarah bled out on their bed while Jack held her hand and felt completely useless. The baby died with her. A boy. He never even drew breath. Jack placed his hat back on and turned toward the ranch house. The land stretched out around him, harsh and indifferent. 50 acres of scrub brush and stubborn cattle. He'd built this place with his own hands, thinking it would be a legacy. Now it felt like a tomb. He'd sell it, pack what little mattered and ride north. Maybe find work on the railroads. Anything to get away from this place and the ghost of what could have been. The day passed in a blur. Jack moved through the motions, feeding horses, checking the well, avoiding the bedroom. When the sun started its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, he found himself sitting at the kitchen table. A bottle of whiskey sat in front of him. He poured a glass but didn't drink it, just stared at the amber liquid like it held answers. The knock came just as darkness settled in. Jack stood, hand instinctively moving to the revolver on his hip. Visitors were rare out here. He opened the door. An Apache woman stood on his porch. She was older, her face lined with years of sun and hardship. She wore traditional dress, her gray hair braided. In her arms, wrapped in a worn blanket, was a baby. The baby was crying. "You, Jack Thornton?" Her English was broken, each word carefully chosen. "I am." She held out the bundle. "Your daughter." Jack stepped back. "I don't have a daughter. My son died 2 days ago with my wife." The woman shook her head. "This baby, Sarah's baby, born 3 months ago at our camp." The words didn't make sense. Jack stared at the crying infant. "That's not possible." "Sarah came to us during the fever, many sick. She helped, brought medicine from town. She was pregnant then. Baby came early. Sarah asked me, Nolan, to keep the child safe, to bring her to you if something happened." Jack's mind raced. Sarah had gone to the Apache camp last spring. She'd been gone for 2 weeks. She said she was helping with an outbreak. When she came back, she was different, quieter. He'd asked if she was all right. She'd smiled and said she was just tired. "I can't," Jack said. "I buried my wife this morning. I can't do this." Nolan looked at him with eyes that had seen too much loss. She placed the baby on the porch, right at his feet. Then she turned and walked into the darkness without another word. The baby screamed louder. Jack stood frozen. The sound cut through him, raw and demanding. He looked down at the tiny face, red with anger or fear or both. Every instinct told him to walk back inside, close the door, let someone else deal with this. But his hands moved on their own. He bent down and picked her up, awkward and uncertain. The blanket was warm. The baby was so small, impossibly fragile. She stopped crying the moment he held her against his chest. Jack stood there on the porch, this stranger in his arms, and felt something crack inside him, not breaking, opening. The night was cold. He carried her inside and closed the door. By morning, Nolan was gone. No tracks, no sign she'd ever been there except for the baby sleeping in a drawer he'd lined with blankets. Jack sat beside her watching her breathe. He had no idea what he was doing, no idea how to feed her or change her or keep her alive. But she was here, and she was his. The ranch suddenly didn't feel so empty. Before we proceed, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are listening from. Jack tried to care for the baby. He really did. But every time Emma cried, which was often, he felt that same helplessness that had gripped him when Sarah's breathing had grown shallow 2 days ago. He didn't know what to do then, and he didn't know what to do now. The morning after Nalin left, Jack stood in his kitchen holding Emma at arm's length, like she might explode. She screamed. Her face was red, her tiny fists shaking. He'd tried feeding her with a cloth soaked in milk. She'd choked and cried harder. He'd tried rocking her. She'd wailed louder. The sun wasn't even fully up yet, and Jack was already defeated. He wrapped her in a blanket and carried her outside. The fresh air seemed to calm her, or maybe she was just exhausted. Her cries faded to whimpers. Jack looked at the grave on the hill and felt anger rise in his chest. Sarah should be here. She'd know what to do. She always knew. By noon, Emma was screaming again. Jack saddled his horse one-handed, tucked Emma against his chest with the other, and rode toward Dry Creek. The town was an hour away, and Emma cried the entire ride. People on the street stopped and stared when he arrived. A cowboy covered in dust, carrying a baby like a sack of grain, looking lost. Jack tied his horse outside the general store and pushed through the door. Mrs. Chen looked up from behind the counter. She was a small woman, maybe 50, with gray streaks in her black hair and sharp eyes that didn't miss much. She'd run the store since her husband died in a mine collapse 5 years back. She saw Emma and didn't ask questions. She just came around the counter, took the baby from Jack's arms, and started checking her over. Emma kept crying, but Mrs. Chen's hands were steady and sure. "When did she last eat?" Mrs. Chen asked. "This morning. I tried giving her milk with a cloth." Mrs. Chen shook her head. "Too slow. She's starving." She grabbed a small glass bottle from a shelf, poured milk into it, and fitted it with a rubber nipple. She handed it to Jack. "Hold her like this. Support her head. Let her drink at her own pace." Jack did what she said. Emma latched onto the bottle and drank like she'd been wandering the desert for days. The crying stopped. The silence felt like a miracle. "She needs to eat every few hours," Mrs. Chen said. "You have bottles at home." Jack shook his head. Mrs. Chen sighed and started gathering supplies. Bottles, cloth diapers, a tin of powdered milk. She put everything in a crate and set it on the counter. "You pay when you can." "I can pay now," Jack said. "Save your money, you'll need it." Jack wanted to argue, but he was too tired. He nodded. "Thank you." As he was leaving, Reverend Holt stepped into the store. He was a tall man with a gray beard and a voice that carried like he was always preaching. He looked at Emma, then at Jack. "Heard about Sarah," Holt said. "Tragic business. But this," he gestured at Emma, "this child needs a proper home, a mother. There are families in town who could take her. Good Christian families." Jack stared at him. "She has a home. You're a rancher, Thornton, alone. You can't raise a child out there." "Watch me." Holt's expression hardened. "Pride is a sin, Jack. Think about what's best for the child, not yourself." Jack shifted Emma in his arms and stepped closer. "Her mother asked someone she trusted to bring her to me. That means something. So unless you want to tell Sarah she was wrong, I suggest you step aside." Holt didn't move for a moment, then stepped back. Jack walked past him and out into the street. The ride back to the ranch was quieter. Emma slept against his chest, full and content. Jack built a cradle that night from scrap wood. It wasn't pretty, but it was sturdy. He set it near his bed and laid Emma inside. She stirred but didn't wake. Jack sat on the edge of his bed and looked at her. He'd buried his wife at dawn. Now he had a daughter he barely knew how to keep alive. But as he watched Emma sleep, something settled in him. Not peace, not happiness, just a quiet determination. He'd figure this out, one day at a time. 3 weeks had gone by since Nalin walked away into the darkness. 3 weeks since Jack Thornton became a father to a child he never expected to have. Emma was getting heavier in his arms, more alert. She'd started reaching for things. His hat, his fingers, the wooden spoon he used to stir her milk. The ranch wasn't thriving, but it was holding together. Jack had figured out a routine. Feed Emma before dawn, check the cattle, fix whatever fence had broken overnight. Feed Emma again, mend the roof where rain leaked through, feed Emma once more before sunset. Sleep came in short bursts between her cries, but he was managing. Then Clayton Voss arrived. Jack was replacing a rotted porch board when he heard the horses. 3 riders came up the path, moving slow and deliberate. Jack recognized Clayton immediately, a man who owned half the valley and wanted the other half. His brothers flanked him, both carrying rifles across their saddles. Jack stood, hammer still in hand, and waited. Clayton didn't dismount. He sat high on his horse, looking down at Jack with the kind of smile that made your jaw tighten. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and held it up. "Got something here you're gonna want to see, Thornton." Jack didn't move. "I'm busy. This won't take long." Clayton unfolded the document. "Your wife took out a loan 8 months back. Medicine money during that fever that went through the Apache camp. She used this ranch as collateral. Signed right here." He pointed at the paper. $800. Due in full 30 days from her passing. Jack felt his stomach drop. Sarah had never mentioned a loan. But during those weeks when the fever spread, she'd been desperate to help. She'd ridden out to the camp every day with whatever supplies she could gather. If she'd needed money for medicine, she would have done whatever it took. "Let me see that." Clayton tossed the paper down. Jack picked it up, scanned it. The signature looked like Sarah's. The date matched. The terms were clear. $800 or the property transferred to Clayton Voss. "You've got 30 days from the date of her death," Clayton said. "That gives you 9 days left. Figure you can scrape together $800 in 9 days. Jack looked up at him. "This is legal?" "Every word. Had the county clerk witness it myself." Clayton leaned forward in his saddle. "Now, I'm a reasonable man. You want to walk away? Take that baby, and whatever you can carry. I won't stop you. Might even throw in $50 for travel money." From inside the house, Emma started crying. The sound cut through the afternoon air. Clayton's eyes shifted toward the door, then back to Jack. "That's a lot of responsibility for a man alone," Clayton said. "Baby, that young needs stability, needs a mother. You're out here trying to work a ranch and raise a child by yourself?" He shook his head. "Something bad could happen. Baby could get sick, could have an accident while you're out checking fence lines. Would be a real shame." Jack's grip tightened on the hammer. The threat wasn't hidden. It sat right there in the open, ugly and clear. "You threatening my daughter?" Clayton raised his hands, still smiling. "Just stating facts. Dangerous world out here. You know that better than most, considering what happened to your wife." One of Clayton's brothers chuckled. Jack took a step forward. Clayton's hand moved toward his gun belt, casual but ready. The brother on the left shifted his rifle. Emma's crying got louder. Jack stopped. He had a hammer. They had guns. And Emma was inside, alone. 9 days, Clayton said. He turned his horse. "After that, this place is mine. You and the baby can clear out, or I'll have the sheriff remove you. Your choice." They rode off, dust trailing behind them. Jack stood there, the loan document in one hand, hammer in the other. Emma was still crying. He walked inside, picked her up, held her against his chest until she settled. She grabbed his shirt with her tiny fist, her face red from crying. $800, 9 days. Jack had $43 to his name. The cattle weren't ready to sell. The ranch itself was barely worth the land it sat on. He could run, pack what little they had, take Emma, and disappear into another territory. Start over. He looked around the small house. Sarah's shawl still hung by the door. Her books sat on the shelf. The cradle he'd built for Emma stood in the corner. This was the only place Emma would ever know her mother, the only ground that connected her to where she came from. Jack wasn't running. Jack rode into Dry Creek the next morning with Emma bundled against his chest. The town was small, barely a dozen buildings scattered along a single dirt road. The general store, the saloon, the church, and a few houses that looked like they might blow away in a strong wind. People stared. A man carrying a baby wasn't common out here. A man carrying a baby alone was even less common. Jack tied his horse outside Chen's general store and walked in. The bell above the door rang. Mrs. Chen looked up from behind the counter. She was a widow, had been running the store since her husband died in a mining accident 5 years back. She didn't smile much, but she didn't judge either. "Mr. Thornton," she said. She noticed Emma. "That's a baby." "Yeah." "Your baby?" "Yeah." Mrs. Chen came around the counter. She looked at how Jack was holding Emma, at the way the blanket was wrapped. "You need help." It wasn't a question. Jack nodded. She took Emma from him, adjusted the blanket, checked her over with quick, efficient movements. "When did she eat last?" "Couple hours ago. I've been giving her milk from the cow, warmed up." "How warm?" "Hot as I can stand on my wrist." Mrs. Chen shook her head. "Too hot. Needs to be warm, not hot. You'll burn her throat." She handed Emma back. "Come here." She led him to the back of the store, showed him how to test the temperature properly, how to hold the bottle so Emma wouldn't swallow air. She pulled items off the shelves, cloth for diapers, a better bottle, some powder for rashes. "How much?" Jack asked. "You have money?" "Some." "Then we'll figure it out." She looked at him. "Why are you really here?" Jack told her about Clayton Voss, about the loan, the deed, the 9 days he had left. Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting. $800, she said when he finished. "Yeah." "You don't have it." "No." She was quiet for a moment. Emma made a small noise, and Jack shifted her in his arms the way Mrs. Chen had shown him. "Cattle drive," Mrs. Chen said. "Blackwater Junction. They're looking for riders. Leaves in 3 days. 2 weeks through Apache country and bandit territory. Pays $300 if you make it. That's less than half. It's a start." She moved back to the counter, wrote something on a piece of paper. "Tom Garrett needs horses broken. He'll pay if you're good. And there's poker at the saloon every night. I heard you used to play." Jack looked down at Emma. "Can't take her on a cattle drive." "No, you can't. Can't leave her alone either." Mrs. Chen met his eyes. "I'll watch her. 2 weeks. You come back. You pay me what you can." "Why would you do that?" "Because Sarah helped my sister when the fever came through. Because that baby didn't ask for any of this. Because Clayton Voss is a bastard, and I'd like to see him lose." She shrugged. "Pick a reason." Jack felt something loosen in his chest. "I'll pay you back." "I know you will." He left the store with supplies and a plan. The cattle drive would give him 300. Breaking horses might get him another 100, maybe 150 if he pushed hard. That still left him short. The poker game was a risk, but it was the only way to close the gap. Sheriff Briggs was standing outside his office when Jack walked past. "Heard about your situation," Briggs said. "Word travels fast." "Small town." Briggs spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Deed's legal. I checked. Nothing I can do unless Voss breaks the law. He threatened my daughter. He implies something bad might happen. That's not the same as a threat I can arrest him for." Briggs looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Jack. I really am. But my hands are tied." Jack nodded. He hadn't expected help from the law anyway. That afternoon, he rode out to Tom Garrett's ranch and signed on to break 6 horses. Garrett looked at his shoulder, still healing from old wounds, and said he'd pay $150 if Jack could handle all 6 without getting killed. Jack took the deal. That night, he sat with Emma on the porch. The sun was setting. Tomorrow he'd start breaking horses. In 3 days, he'd leave for Blackwater Junction. "I'm going to fix this," he told her. She looked up at him with dark eyes. "I'm going to keep this place for you." Emma grabbed his finger. Her grip was strong. Jack rode into Dry Creek the next morning with Emma bundled against his chest. The town was barely more than a dozen buildings scattered along a dirt road that turned to mud when it rained. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. Sheriff Briggs had an office next to the telegraph station. Jack found him drinking coffee, boots up on his desk. Briggs was in his 50s, gray beard, gut hanging over his belt. He'd been sheriff for 20 years and looked like he'd stopped caring about 15 years ago. Jack dropped the loan document on his desk. "Clayton Voss came by yesterday. Says my ranch belongs to him now." Briggs picked up the paper, read it slowly. Emma squirmed. Jack adjusted her, tried to keep her comfortable. "Signature looks legitimate," Briggs said. He set the paper down. "Date matches up with when the fever was going through the Apache camp. Your wife was helping out there, right?" "She was." "Then it's legal." Briggs leaned back in his chair. "Nothing I can do unless Voss breaks the law. Has he?" Jack thought about the threat Clayton had made, the way he'd looked at Emma. But it had been words, nothing concrete, nothing a sheriff could act on. "No." "Then you've got 9 days to come up with the money or lose your land." Briggs sipped his coffee. "That's how debt works." Jack left the office. Emma started fussing, so he walked to the general store. Mrs. Chen was sweeping the porch. She saw him coming and set the broom aside. "How is the baby?" "She's fine." Jack stepped into the shade. "I need advice." Mrs. Chen took Emma, held her naturally, like she'd done it 1,000 times. Emma calmed immediately. They went inside where it was cooler. Jack explained the situation. The loan, the deadline, the money he didn't have. Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, rocking Emma gently. "The cattle drive to Blackwater Junction leaves in 3 days," she said. "They need men. Pay is $300, 2 weeks of work." Jack had heard about the drive. Dangerous work through Apache territory and bandit country. Men died on those drives, but $300 was more than he could make any other way in the time he had. "I'd need someone to watch Emma." "I will watch her." Mrs. Chen said it simply, like it was already decided. "You go, make the money, come back." "That's only 300. I need 800. Tom Garrett needs someone to break his horses. He pays well. $50 a horse if you can handle them. Dangerous, but you are capable." Jack did the math. 6 horses would be 300 more. That left 200 short. Mrs. Chen looked at him. "You play poker?" "Used to." "The saloon has games every night. High stakes on Fridays." She shifted Emma to her other arm. "You are good?" "Good enough." "Then you have a plan." She handed Emma back to him. "But you must be careful. Clayton Voss plays those games. He will know what you are doing." Jack took Emma, felt her weight against him. 2 weeks away from her. 2 weeks of hard riding, danger, and uncertainty. But it was the only way to keep the ranch, to keep the home that connected her to Sarah. "When do I start breaking horses?" "Tomorrow. Tom's ranch is an hour north." Mrs. Chen went behind the counter, pulled out a small bag. "Take this, dried meat, bread. You will need strength." Jack tried to pay her. She refused. That night, he sat on the porch with Emma. The stars were out, bright and cold. He told her about the plan. even though she couldn't understand. Told her he'd be gone for a while, but he'd come back. Promised her they'd keep this place. She fell asleep in his arms. He carried her inside, laid her in the cradle, stood there watching her breathe. 2 weeks, 3 jobs, $800. Jack Thornton had buried his wife 12 days ago. Now he was fighting to keep the only thing he had left to give his daughter, a piece of ground that meant something, that held memory and blood and belonging. He packed his saddlebag that night. At dawn, he'd ride to Tom Garrett's ranch and start breaking horses that wanted to kill him. After that, the cattle drive. After that, whatever came next. Emma slept through it all, peaceful and unaware. Jack rode into Dry Creek the next morning with Emma bundled against his chest. The town was waking up slow, shopkeepers sweeping porches, a dog barking somewhere down the street. He tied his horse outside the sheriff's office and went inside. Sheriff Briggs sat behind his desk, coffee steaming in a tin cup. He looked up when Jack entered, saw the baby, raised an eyebrow. "Need to ask you about something," Jack said. He laid the loan document on the desk. Briggs picked it up, read it over. His face didn't change. "Clayton Voss brought this by last week, had it recorded proper. I'm sorry, Jack." "So it's legal?" "Looks that way. Signature matches what we have on file for Sarah. Date's legitimate." Briggs set the paper down. "You got the money?" "Not yet." "Then you got a problem." Briggs sipped his coffee. "I can't do anything unless Voss breaks the law. Right now, he's just collecting on a debt." Jack picked up the document, folded it. Emma squirmed against him, making small sounds. "He came to my place yesterday. Made it clear what would happen if I don't pay." "He threatened you directly?" "Not in words you could repeat in court." Briggs nodded. "That's how Clayton works, stays just inside the line." He stood, walked to the window. "You need $800 in 9 days. That's not possible, Jack. Not for most men out here." "I'm not most men." "No, I suppose you're not." Briggs turned back. "But even if you were, where would you get that kind of money? You can't sell cattle that fast. Can't sell the land. That's what's at stake. What are you planning?" Jack adjusted Emma in his arms. "The cattle drive to Blackwater Junction. Leaves in 2 days. That pays $300. You'd still be short." "I know." Briggs studied him. "That drive goes through rough country. Bandits, Apache territory. Men have died on that route." "I know that too." "And the baby?" "Mrs. Chen said she'd watch her while I'm gone." Briggs sat back down, rubbed his face. "You're gambling everything on this." "I don't have another choice." The sheriff didn't argue. He just nodded. Jack left the office, walked down to the general store. Mrs. Chen was arranging canned goods on a shelf. She smiled when she saw Emma. "She's getting bigger," Mrs. Chen said. She reached out, let Emma grab her finger. "You talked to the sheriff?" "Yeah, the debt's real." Mrs. Chen's smile faded. "I heard about the cattle drive. You're going?" "Have to. It's $300. That's not enough. I'll figure out the rest." Jack shifted his weight. "I need to ask you something. The drive takes 2 weeks, maybe more if we hit trouble. Can you watch Emma while I'm gone?" Mrs. Chen looked at the baby, then at Jack. "You trust me with her?" "You're the only person in this town I do trust." She nodded slowly. "Bring her by the day before you leave. I'll need some things, milk, cloths, that cradle you built if you can spare it. I'll bring everything. Jack?" Mrs. Chen touched his arm. "The cattle drive gets you 300. You need 500 more. What's your plan for that?" "There's a rancher north of here needs horses broken. Pays 50 per horse. Dangerous work, but I can do it. That's another 150 if I break 3 before the drive. Still short." Jack knew. He'd done the math 100 times. I'll play poker when I get back. High-stakes game at the saloon runs every Saturday night. If I'm careful, if I play it right, I can make up the difference." Mrs. Chen's expression tightened. "That's a big if. It's what I have." She didn't argue, just squeezed his arm once and went back to her work. Jack walked outside, stood in the street holding Emma. The sun beat down, dust blew past. Somewhere a hammer rang against metal, the blacksmith working. 2 weeks away from Emma, 2 weeks of hard riding, dangerous country, and no guarantee he'd come back. Then a poker game where he'd bet everything he had left. It wasn't a plan. It was desperation dressed up as hope. But it was all he had. Jack looked down at Emma. She stared back at him with dark eyes, serious and calm. Sarah's eyes. "I'm going to fix this," he said quietly. "I promise." The baby didn't understand. She just held onto his shirt and made a small sound that might have been contentment or might have been nothing at all. Jack carried her back to the horse and started the ride home. 9 days left. The clock was running, and Clayton Voss was waiting to take everything. Jack spent the next 2 days working like a man possessed. The rancher north of town, a grizzled Texan named Walt Garrison, had 4 wild Mustangs that needed breaking, $50 per horse. Jack took the job knowing what it meant. Broken ribs if he was lucky, broken neck if he wasn't. The first horse threw him twice before he got it under control. His shoulder, still healing from the bullet graze, screamed every time he hit the ground. The second horse was meaner, tried to crush him against the fence. Jack held on, talked it down, felt something shift in his lower back that would hurt for weeks. By the end of the second day, he'd broken 3 horses. Walt paid him in cash, counted out $150 into his palm. Jack pocketed the money and rode back to Dry Creek without saying much. His body felt like it had been dragged behind a wagon. Mrs. Chen was waiting at her store when he arrived with Emma and the cradle. She'd prepared a small room in the back, cleared out storage to make space for the baby. Jack set everything down, showed her how Emma liked to be held, what sounds meant she was hungry versus tired. 2 weeks, Mrs. Chen said. Maybe less if the drive goes smooth. I'll be back as soon as I can. Jack held Emma for a long time that evening. She grabbed his finger, made those small noises she'd started making recently, almost like she was trying to talk. He told her about her mother, about how Sarah used to sing even when times were hard. He promised he'd come back, that he'd keep their home safe. When he finally handed Emma to Mrs. Chen, the baby started crying. Jack almost changed his mind right there, almost said he'd find another way, any other way. But Mrs. Chen just smiled, bounced Emma gently, and the crying stopped. "She'll be fine," Mrs. Chen said. "You go do what you need to do." The cattle drive left at dawn. 6 men total, including Jack. The trail boss was a man named Garrett who'd done this route a dozen times. They pushed 300 head of cattle south toward Blackwater Junction, moving through country that got rougher with each passing day. The first week was dust and heat. Jack's hands blistered from holding the reins. His throat went raw from breathing dirt. They crossed a river on the 5th day. The current was stronger than Garrett expected. 2 cattle got swept away, drowned before anyone could rope them. One of the riders, a kid barely 20, nearly went under too. Jack grabbed his arm, hauled him back onto his horse. That night, bandits hit them. 4 riders came out of the darkness, guns drawn, demanding the herd. Garrett shot first. Jack and the others returned fire. The fight lasted maybe 3 minutes, but felt like an hour. 1 bandit went down. The others ran. Nobody on Jack's side died, but the kid who'd nearly drowned took a bullet through his leg. They bandaged him up, kept moving. On the 9th day, they entered Apache territory. Garrett went quiet, told everyone to keep their weapons ready but not drawn. They rode carefully, watched the ridge lines. The Apache appeared on the 2nd day in their land. 8 riders painted for war, blocking the trail. Garrett raised his hand, signaled everyone to stop. The Apache leader rode forward. Jack recognized him. The same hard eyes as Nalin, the same bearing. Her son. The Apache looked at Jack, said something in his language, then in broken English. "You are the one who holds Nalin's gift." Jack nodded. "Emma, my daughter. Your woman helped our people when sickness came. We do not forget." He gestured to the trail ahead. "You may pass. No harm will come." They let the herd through. Garrett didn't ask questions, just kept the cattle moving. But that night around the fire, he looked at Jack differently. "What did you do to earn that?" Garrett asked. "I didn't do anything," Jack said. "My wife did." They reached Blackwater Junction on the 13th day. The buyer counted the herd, paid Garrett, and Garrett divided the money, $300, exactly as promised. Jack took his share, felt the weight of it in his pocket. He had $450 total now. He needed $350 more, and the deadline was 5 days away. Jack rode back to the ranch and started preparing. The next morning, he saddled up before dawn and headed north to the Callahan property. Old man Callahan bred mustangs, wild ones brought down from the hills. Breaking them paid well because it was the kind of work that could kill you if you weren't careful. Callahan stood by the corral fence, arms crossed. 3 horses inside, all of them skittish and mean. "50 per horse," he said. "You get thrown, that's on you. No doctor for 20 miles. Jack nodded. "I'll take all 3. He started with a gray mare, the smallest of the lot. She bucked hard, twisted in ways that made his ribs ache. He held on, talked low and steady, let her tire herself out. By noon, she was walking circles around the corral with Jack on her back. Callahan paid him and pointed to the next one. The second horse was a black stallion with a mean streak. He threw Jack twice. The second time, Jack hit the ground hard enough to taste blood. His shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed him during the cattle drive. It hadn't fully healed. He got back up, climbed on again. The stallion bucked, reared, slammed sideways into the fence. Jack stayed on. It took 2 hours, but the horse finally settled. Callahan handed him another $50. "You're tougher than you look." Jack wiped blood from his lip. "One more." The third horse was a red roan, bigger than the others, meaner too. She threw Jack 4 times. On the 5th try, something in Jack's shoulder popped. Pain shot down his arm, white hot and sharp. He gritted his teeth, stayed on, and rode her until she stopped fighting. Callahan paid him the last 50. Jack rode back to town with $150 and an arm he could barely lift. Mrs. Chen saw him wince when he dismounted. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Let me see." She made him sit, checked his shoulder. It wasn't dislocated, just badly strained. She wrapped it tight, gave him willow bark tea for the pain. "You leave tomorrow for the cattle drive. You can't go like this." "I don't have a choice." She didn't argue, just finished wrapping his shoulder and handed him the tea. That night, Jack held Emma on the porch. She was asleep, her tiny hand curled against his chest. He memorized the weight of her, the way she breathed, the small sounds she made. 2 weeks away from her felt impossible. "I'll come back," he whispered. "I promise." The next morning, he brought Emma to Mrs. Chen's house, along with the cradle, milk, and everything else she'd need. Mrs. Chen took the baby gently, held her close. "She'll be safe. You focus on staying alive out there." Jack nodded. He kissed Emma's forehead, turned, and walked out before he could change his mind. The cattle drive left at dawn. 6 men, 200 head of cattle, and 14 days of hard country ahead. Jack rode with his shoulder aching, his mind on Emma and the debt hanging over everything. They crossed rivers, fought dust storms, and lost sleep to night watches. Bandits hit them on the 5th day, 3 men on horseback trying to scatter the herd. Jack fired his rifle one-handed, drove them off with the others. His shoulder screamed, but he kept moving. In Apache territory, they slowed down. Jack rode point, watching the hills. Then riders appeared, 6 Apache warriors on horseback. Jack recognized one of them, Nolan's son, the man who'd brought Emma to him. The Apache leader rode forward, looked at Jack. A moment passed. Then he nodded once and turned his horse away. The others followed. The cattle drive continued without incident. They reached Blackwater Junction on the 13th day. Jack collected his $300, exhausted and half-broken. He had $450 total now, still $350 short. He rode back to Dry Creek, went straight to Mrs. Chen's house. Emma was there, healthy and safe. Jack held her, felt something in his chest unclench. "Saturday night," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "The poker game. That's your last chance." Jack nodded. He had 5 days to heal and 1 night to win everything.